Hi, thank you for joining us. My name's Amy. I'm a senior psychological wellbeing practitioner, and I'm joined by my colleague Shanaz. Do you want to introduce yourself, Shanaz?
Hi everyone, my name is Shanaz Begum and I'm a senior psychological wellbeing practitioner.
We're here today to go through a little PowerPoint we put together called Managing Wellbeing During a Pandemic. We'll start by just telling you a little bit more about iCope and who we are, and then we'll move on to telling you a little bit more about what to expect from this session. So you might already know about iCope, you might be already a patient with us, you might not, that's okay. But in iCope, we're a service that support people with mild to moderate anxiety or depression, mostly. We also support with other things as well. And we're a IAP service, so we're an improving access to psychological therapy service based in Camden and Islington. We primarily offer work based on cognitive behavioural therapy or CBT. And another thing about us is we're not a crisis service, so we don't offer kind of immediate support, but we do offer support which is, I guess, aimed more around kind of helping people with, like I mentioned, mild to moderate difficulties. But we'll go on to talk a little bit more about if you are interested in a crisis service, we do have some options for that as well. So if you're needing some more urgent support, we know that this is something that's really common. Thoughts of self-harm or suicide happen for a lot of people, especially when we're experiencing anxiety or depression. If you're having these kind of thoughts of being better off dead or of hurting yourself in some way, that's okay. We've got some resources below that you could help you out. So one option might be to contact your GP. Another option might be to contact the Samaritans. They offer free, confidential, 24-hour support. You can either call them anonymously if you want to, or you can email them as well if you just want to talk to somebody, have some emotional support. Also, each borough in London has their own crisis team, and our crisis team, the number is just here. So again, you can contact them 24/7. They're a team that's run by mental health professionals. They can offer some more immediate support as well. There's also the Stay Alive app, which is a really great app. It offers kind of support in your local area. It also offers some different tools and techniques, some places where you can write notes and keep pictures as well, which is really great. And it might not be that you feel like you need any of this support at the moment. These might not feel relevant to you, and that's okay. We just put them up here just in case you ever need them in the future. Or maybe if you know anybody that does need them or would find them helpful, you can always pass them on to those people as well.
So just some helpful tips before we begin the workshop. It might be helpful for you to have a pen and some paper to hand. This might be because there's particular points that's really stood out to you, or you want to draw out something for yourself. So it's quite helpful to make notes in this way. You are also welcome to pause the video at any point. Again, this is for the purpose of if you want to kind of just take a moment to take in what we've discussed, or you wanted to go back and listen to it again, or again, giving yourself some time to listen to what we've said or making notes. There may be some parts of the workshop that feel more relevant to you than others. So we'd encourage you to write down anything that you think will be helpful. You could perhaps take a photo of the slide or a screenshot of it as a reminder to yourself. Hopefully there will be lots of helpful tips throughout the workshop that you'll be taking away today. So the aims of the workshop today is to understand our feelings and understanding your own experience of low mood during a pandemic. It's also to help us understand and change unhelpful behaviours that we might be doing because of the situation that we're in. We also want to think about and understand the link between eating, sleeping and exercise and how this can impact our mood as well. We also want to understand and change unhelpful thinking, and ideally we want to develop better habits while self-isolating, so learning some helpful tools and techniques to help us manage our well-being better. So what we have here is what we call a 5 areas model or a maintenance cycle. So this is kind of based on cognitive behavioural therapy. You can see there's 4 main circles here, but the 5th area is a situation. So what we know is the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we perceive others and things that happen around us. It can affect how we feel in our emotions. It can impact how we feel physically in our body. We might notice some physical sensations. And it can also influence how we respond to a situation. So what we do with our behaviours. What we also know is the things that we do or that we don't do can also affect our emotions and the way that we think. So cognitive behavioural therapy is looking at your behaviours and your thoughts, because these are 2 areas that we're able to make changes in. And by making a change in one of these areas, or even both, it should improve how you feel in your emotions and reduce any physical symptoms that you might be experiencing.
So here we have an example of one of this cycle that Shanaz just explained to us, but we've got some examples in here as well. So a situation that we've got here is that Amanda used to cycle to and from work and go to the gym in the evenings. Due to COVID-19, she's working from home and her gym is closed and she's lost motivation, has more time on her hands. I think that this is probably a situation that lots of us can identify with at the moment, maybe having more time at home, more time to think, less time focusing on work, or being able to go to the gym or do the things that maybe we enjoyed after work. And some of the thoughts here that have been going through Amanda's mind is, I don't want to do anything, and there's nothing I can do while I'm at home. There's no point taking care of myself. I look and feel horrible. And these types of thoughts can really feed into these negative emotions and also these kind of physical symptoms and behaviours. So Amanda's having these kind of thoughts, and this leads her to maybe avoid leaving the house or avoid phone calls or texts from her friends or family. She might eat more, comfort eat, and she's been working from her bed as well. This has also led to kind of these emotions of feeling guilty, feeling low, feeling tired, and feeling lethargic. So all of these different areas, they kind of have this domino effect on one another. They feed into each other. By doing less, by maybe avoiding talking to people, maybe not leaving the house at all, that can really feed into feeling more tired and feeling more lethargic. If we do less, we can feel much more tired. And again, those thoughts of maybe feeling guilty, maybe I should have talked to my friends, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I don't feel like doing anything. If we're having these kind of thoughts, again, it's going to really impact upon all of these different areas. And I guess what I hope that this illustrates is that, you know, it can be really helpful to just spend some time thinking about kind of all of these different areas. We might not have noticed these things happening before. So hopefully this map just maps it out for us, makes it a bit more kind of simple, makes it more clear for us to maybe notice the cycle happening in our day-to-day. And here's an example of this vicious cycle. We've kind of simplified this even more, taken out those kind of specific examples from Amanda. So what we know typically for most people is that when we feel low, we do less and we avoid things. In the short term, that might give us some relief. We might feel kind of pleased about that. But if it's something we keep doing and we repeat that pattern, actually what we do is we find that we have fewer opportunities for pleasure, to feel good about ourselves. We miss out on those opportunities to get a sense of achievement, a sense of pleasure. And again, if we're doing less, it means that we have more time to think and more time to maybe focus on other things, to ruminate, to let our thoughts drift to the past or to the future. And again, that can really lead to those kind of negative emotions, so feeling sad or tired. And when we're feeling like that, when we're feeling more low, it's much harder to experience pleasure. It's much harder to maybe get joy from things that we used to find joy in. And if we're trying to do those things that we used to enjoy and we're not enjoying them anymore, that just leads us to not want to do them even more. So it's really easy to get caught up in this cycle of doing less, avoiding things. And I guess what we're kind of hoping that we can teach is that if we do some small things to help us to break out of this cycle, we can start to feel better. So our main aim is to try to help us to do more. So start to be more active, start to engage in more things, have more opportunities to feel good about ourselves. And I guess that sounds really difficult to do, and it is really difficult. And I mean, I make it sound really easy by just saying do more, but we'll talk a bit more further on in this workshop about how we actually do those things. And I guess that example that we gave, we're just thinking about low mood and maybe negative thoughts, but also this cycle might work thinking in a more kind of positive way as well. So if you think about a time where we felt good, we were probably seeing our friends more, doing more, maybe we had some hobbies and interests and things that we were interested in. And generally, if we're being more active, we're being more sociable, that gives us more opportunities to feel good. We get this sense of achievement and purpose in our day-to-day. And it's easier to be more positive and to have more sense of self-worth if we're doing these things and we're interacting with people. And this can kind of lead to those feelings of feeling happy, content, calm. So yeah, I hope again that this kind of illustrates that all of these different areas are kind of impacted on one another. And if we start doing more, we start engaging in more things, this happier, more positive feelings. So we'd really encourage you to spend some time creating your own vicious and virtuous cycle. So think of a time where maybe you felt low, that might be recently over the past couple of weeks. And then again, think of a time of when you were feeling good. And just have a look at what those cycles look like for you. What's different about them? What were you doing in that virtuous cycle that was helping that you're not doing in this vicious cycle? What's the things in that vicious cycle that are maybe maintaining that cycle? What's some maybe unhelpful behaviours or unhelpful thoughts, something that might be kind of propelling that cycle and keeping it going? You might want to spend some time doing that now. You might want to pause the video and just reflect on that, or it's totally fine to come back and do it later, but we'd really encourage just to spend some time doing this. Hopefully, if you have a think about what this looks like for you, you can take it away into your day-to-day and you'll start to recognize these kind of patterns happening. Once you can start recognizing them, that's when you can start making some kind of positive change.
So we want to understand how our unhelpful behaviours can affect us. So as you would have seen from the vicious cycle, is that when we do less or avoid things, it can make us feel low, or we can engage in unhelpful behaviours, as in the short term, they make us feel good or give us a sense of relief. But over time, what happens is that it reduces the time we give to meaningful and productive activities, and it makes us feel low in mood. It can impact our well-being and us finding satisfaction in things. So some examples of unhelpful behaviours during this time may be aimlessly surfing the internet, kind of just browsing our phone on YouTube or social media, kind of not focusing on anything. It might be ruminating, thinking negatively about the things that have happened in the past, kind of just sitting and dwelling on these things. It might also be that you worry about the future, kind of the news that we are seeing at the moment, or catastrophizing what we hear and what we do. Sometimes it might lead us to doing things that are unhelpful, things that we wouldn't be doing much of but are doing excessively now, such as drinking alcohol. It could be avoiding your responsibilities, whether that's the bills, whether that's kind of meeting deadlines of work. We might end up comfort eating because we're spending a lot of time at home, or sometimes we might feel a bit bored, or it could go the other way. We might not be eating as much because we're just not in the mood. And it might be that we're sleeping at irregular hours just because there's a lack of structure and routine. And that's what self-isolation can do to us. It can make us engage in these unhelpful behaviors, and it disrupts our kind of day-to-day normal routine that we have. It also means that we have less social contact and spend more time in our own homes. And we know that low mood can be maintained by a reduction in our routines and activity. And so therefore, we're going to focus on changing our unhelpful behaviours. Now, what we want to think about are some of the things that you have given up since feeling low or since being in lockdown, and to also think of some things that you would like to do or start to do for the first time. Now, let's think about three main areas in our life, one of them being routine activities. So these are things that you would kind of do on a regular basis and quite often. Some examples here are waking up at a regular time. We might feel that, oh, there's not much structure to our day, or I don't need to get up as early as I usually do. So kind of waking up, we're not doing that. So what we want to do is maybe wake up at a regular time to help us. It might be that we want to be getting dressed regularly. You know, as we're spending a lot of time at home, we might be sitting in our pajamas or not making much of an effort. So it's quite important to kind of make us feel ready for the day. Might also be having regular meals and meal times. You know, if we're spending a lot of time at home again, we might be less structured with that. So that can help us, you know, regulate our day and create more of a routine. Other things here are kind of going to bed at a regular time, or going for regular exercise, such as going for a walk or doing yoga at home. There may be other things that you can think of, so you're more than welcome to take a moment to think, are there any other routine activities that I've stopped doing as a result of the situation, or things that I want to do again, or that I've not done and I want to make time for? Another area in our life is necessary. So these are things that if we were to stop doing them or avoid them, there may be a negative consequence. Again, some examples here might be paying the bills, staying on top of our laundry, attending appointments, whether that's a GP appointment over the phone or with a consultant, whether that's a call with an energy company, could be anything. Might be doing the food shop or an online food order. We might not be making much time for that. Or meeting deadlines, whether that's your university studies, college assignments, might be sending an email with work. There might be a few things that we would have stopped doing here. So again, you can take some time to think for a moment if there's anything else that you've stopped doing, or anything else that you feel is necessary and you want to start doing.
And then the final area to think about is also pleasurable activities. So these might be activities that bring us a sense of joy, things that we find pleasurable, might be our hobbies, it might be our interests, things that maybe help us to relax. We've got some examples here: painting, drawing, listening to a podcast, doing arts and crafts, having a bath. And I guess it's important to note that all of these different activities are very individual. We've given examples of all of the different areas, so like routine, necessary, and pleasurable. But yeah, these are going to be really individual for you. So have a think about what you find pleasurable. And I guess, like Shanaz said, what we know is that when we're feeling quite low, particularly in a situation like now in lockdown, our kind of a balance of these activities might be very different. We might kind of be doing less or completely stop doing some of these things. We might find pleasurable things harder to do. Maybe it's we don't quite have the time for them, or maybe we just don't feel like we're enjoying those things as much anymore, so we haven't been doing them. But it's really important to have this balance, and this is what we've got here. We've got the three-legged stool image. This might be something just to keep in mind. So it's important for us to have a balance of each of these types of activities. Even if we were, for example, if we're just doing loads and loads of pleasurable things and no routine, no necessary things, still our stool's going to be wobbly. We're going to be off balance. We can't just spend all of our day doing loads of pleasurable things and totally avoiding other things. Those routine activities are still things that might give us a sense of achievement and a sense of purpose to our day. Those necessary things, there might be a kind of a really negative consequence if we don't do them, if we don't do our work or our schoolwork or whatever it is that's kind of a necessary thing in our life. So it's really important to try to have a balance of all of these activities, doing a little bit of each of them. It can be helpful to maybe just spend a bit of time thinking about your day-to-day at the moment, what your kind of schedule looks like in lockdown. Do you think you're getting a balance of these activities? Are you just doing loads of routine things and not very many pleasurable things? Are you just doing all of the pleasurable things and nothing else? Just maybe, spend some time having a think about what that might be like for you. What we'd encourage you to do is to create a hierarchy of activities, and we've got an example here. So we've got a list of kind of easy activities, moderate activities, and then more difficult activities, and we've split them up again into those three main categories: routine, necessary, and pleasurable. So I guess within this easy category, that might be things that you're already doing, things that feel doable, things that feel like they're achievable and easy for you to do. This moderate category might be the things that feel a little bit more difficult, things that maybe you wish you could be doing, you'd like to be doing, things which maybe you do sometimes but not all the time. Sometimes if you're feeling particularly low or stressed, and that can feel really hard to do. So things that maybe feel a bit more difficult. And then we have this difficult category, the things that maybe we're aiming for in the future. Maybe they're a bit more of a long-term goal. Maybe there's something that we can work towards, something you'd like to be doing, which feels a bit more difficult to do at the moment. And I guess what we're kind of doing with this hierarchy, by splitting our activities into easy, moderate, and difficult, we don't want people to kind of feel this pressure to just start doing loads of things. And I think that's really difficult to do, and it also might lead into this idea of boom and bust. So maybe we're having a really good week and we start doing loads and we start feeling better and we think, yeah, I've done great this week. But actually that can be really hard to maintain and to keep that up. Maybe we've done too much and we exhaust ourselves, and then the next week we find those things really hard and we don't do as much. This can really fuel those kind of guilty feelings and thoughts of like, I didn't do well enough, or I could have done better, or how could I do it last week and I couldn't do it this week. And it can be really easy to get caught up in this cycle of boom and bust. So kind of breaking these activities down into easy, moderate, and difficult means that we kind of avoid that cycle. We don't just jump into doing the things that we feel really difficult. We're just going to start by doing the easy activities. We're going to work up to doing some more moderate activities. And in the future, we can work up to doing those more difficult activities. Kind of hoping that as you kind of go through doing your easy activities and you move into your moderate, your mood will start to improve, and your energy levels and your sense of motivation will also improve. And so doing those difficult things will feel a lot easier, and it will also be a lot easier to maintain those things and to keep going with them, hence kind of avoiding that boom and bust cycle. So again, maybe it could be helpful to just spend some time having to think about what this hierarchy might look like for you. What kind of activities you might put as easy, moderate, and then more difficult things that you could work up to. And once you've created this hierarchy and you've got the ideas of the activities that you'd like to be doing, the next step is about scheduling those activities into a diary. I guess diaries, it's quite a simple concept, but we know that a diary can be really, really powerful. It can be a really helpful tool. So it's about using this as a way to help you to kind of propel you forward by scheduling in things coming up. I guess there's just something about having it written down and having this appointment with ourselves that can help us to feel more motivated to do those things. Another benefit to the diary is that we can make sure we're getting a balance of activities. We can see quite clearly if we are getting that. By kind of scheduling in those activities, we're kind of making sure that we are getting that balance. Another kind of helpful thing about the diary is that I know for a lot of people, they might say things like, I haven't really done anything this week, or I don't really have anything to do. And I guess the diary just illustrates that it can be a really helpful thing to illustrate that we have actually done quite a lot with our week and we've been really productive. And even though we're indoors and there's not as much things we can do, there's still lots of time that we can spend on things, and we can kind of helps us to use our time a bit more wisely, I guess, and be a bit more kind of productive with how we're spending our time. So in this example here, we've got kind of waking up at a regular time, finishing a project, meeting with a friend, a Zoom quiz. So we've got a bit of a balance here of some routine things, getting up at the same time, some pleasurable things, maybe some things that need to be done, like finishing the project for work as well. I think it's very important as well not to set yourself really, really high standards and really high targets. So for example, we haven't got kind of doing lots of things on just one day and maybe not the other days. All of this is kind of spread out. We're not giving ourselves too much. We need to make sure that what we're kind of scheduling in for ourselves is really realistic and it feels achievable for us. The diary it's not a stick to kind of beat yourself with. I think a lot of people might look at their diary and maybe struggle if they haven't been able to achieve those things that week. But that's okay, that's fine. Maybe it's just about spending some time thinking, like, why wasn't I able to do those things this week? Maybe it wasn't realistic or achievable what I'd set out to do. Let's have a rethink about that. How could I make that a bit easier? So yeah, give it a go. It might feel a bit tricky at first. Just be gentle with yourself, set yourself a few things, and then build up to setting yourself more things to do. Start with those easier activities and build up to the more moderate activities. And then hopefully, I guess the schedule can be there as a motivational tool, and also a tool to kind of reflect on, to show how much you have been doing. And that can be a really helpful thing. So we'd encourage you to go ahead and try this for yourself. You might want to do that now. You might want to pause the video and spend a bit of time thinking about what your hierarchy looks like and start planning out a diary. You might want to do your diary in a notebook, on your phone, on a laptop, however works for you. Just spend a bit of time thinking about how could this work for me? What would be a kind of a good and realistic way to do this? And like we said, it's something that you might want to pause the video and do now, or maybe spend some time thinking about it a bit later.
Now, what we also want to think about is how eat, sleep, and exercise can also impact our mood. So it's quite important that in regards to eating, that we have a balanced diet. And you might want to take a moment to consider if you have been overeating or undereating, how might you change this? And we know that improving our diet can help us improve our mood, it can give us more energy, and it can also help us to think more clearly. And eating regularly can also kind of help regulate and create a routine in our life. So for example, you might be eating breakfast and that helps you to have a good start to the day. Rather than eating a large lunch and dinner, you might try and eat smaller portions throughout the day. And I guess we're wanting to avoid foods that might lead us down a negative spiral, or comfort eating, or the sugary snacks and things. So kind of just taking a moment to think about how balanced is my diet, and how can I change this. What we know about sleep as well is that it's important to have a calm and relaxing environment in your bedroom, making sure that it's not too warm or too cold, making sure that the lighting in the room is enough for you to relax. Why not also try a wind down routine before bed? So this could be something like, half an hour to an hour before you want to have this regular sleeping time. You might take that time to mindfully get dressed into your pajamas. It might be brushing your teeth or washing your face. You might decide to do a bit of relaxation just before bed, helping your mind to get into this kind of way of thinking that I'm preparing myself to go to sleep, and that can help improve our mood as well. We also know that exercise can add structure and purpose to our day and increase our energy levels. It can be difficult if we're not able to go out all the time for exercise during this time, but don't let that limit you. Exercise can be done at home as well. It could be done through online Zoom classes or on YouTube, or perhaps you could do this with another person in your home. Might you start it in the morning to help you prepare for the day, or maybe it's something that you do after the end of your day and any commitments that you have. So it's important to think about each of these 3 areas in our life because they can help improve our mood significantly. So some top tips to scheduling your diary is that you want to start small and build from there. Maybe think about the task. If it seems like it's really daunting and it's really huge, perhaps you could break it down. You also want to think about SMART goals. So this term stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. Maybe it might be about doing exercise. How can you make that SMART? You know, what specific exercise do you want to be doing? How often do you want to be doing it? You know, is it achievable? Is it realistic in kind of the commitments that you have? So kind of making them really specific to help guide us in terms of what we want to achieve. In regards to scheduling your diary, it might also involve other people. Could it be that you do exercise on YouTube with a friend via video call? Could it be that a task that you need to do for work or with family? You know, you might need the support of someone to do this. So kind of using the help where you can. And also there's this 5-minute rule. So you want to attempt to do a task for at least 5 minutes. We don't want to think about your level of motivation at this time. You'd rather do something for 5 minutes rather than not doing it at all. So just telling yourself, maybe if I try this for 5 minutes and seeing how you go, it may be that you end up doing it for much longer, which is also good. You also want to be flexible and kind to yourself. You know, avoid cramming in too much in one day and spread it throughout the week. Sometimes some of these things can be postponed just because there are obstacles that arise unexpectedly, and that's okay. You know, maybe you could do this task at a different day or time. And like Amy mentioned earlier, you want to avoid the boom and bust cycle. So not cramming in so much throughout the week that by the end of it, you feel really exhausted and you don't have the energy, which can then lead you into that negative cycle again of not having the motivation to do things for the following week. It might also be helpful to monitor your mood. So think about how you felt before doing the task and how you felt after it. Monitoring our mood in this way when we're doing specific tasks allows us to see the effects of carrying it out and the effect it has on our mood. So it's quite important to think about this. And you might not notice the pleasure or the enjoyment from things straight away, but this is definitely something that comes over time. So we'd encourage you to kind of stick with it until you begin to notice a difference. And again, these are things that don't happen overnight. It's just about kind of being slightly disciplined with ourselves and trying to help ourselves get better. What we want to think about now is managing our negative thoughts. So our thoughts are constantly helping us interpret the world around us. It's shaping our understanding of events and how we feel. And these thoughts happen automatically. So we instantly kind of believe our thoughts to be true. And what we have here is a diagram which kind of explains there's a situation or an event. And then based on that and how we're feeling, we give it a meaning. We've interpreted this situation perhaps in a negative way. And then that can make us feel quite down or low. We could be quite self-critical. But what we want to understand is that our thoughts are not facts and they're often very biased. We tend to focus mainly on the threat or the current problem. And by doing that, it can impair our ability to take into account other perspectives. And this maintains this negative feeling and the thoughts that we have. So we will be more likely to think negative automatic thoughts if we feel low or if we're exposed to a lot of negative stimuli, such as the news.
So we know that our thoughts really impact on how we're feeling, and then how we're feeling really impacts on what we do. So I guess thinking about that cycle, we're just trying to tackle how could we think about our thoughts in maybe a different way. And it's not about being positive all the time, it's just about trying to think about things in a balanced way. So one of the first steps is trying to identify types of thinking styles. So all of us have thinking styles. It's something that we all do. When we're feeling maybe low or anxious, we might tend to focus on a particular style more. But this is going to be really different for everybody. But here we've got some examples of some very common types of thinking styles. These things impact upon everybody. So we've got catastrophizing, so jumping to that worst case scenario, thinking about the most possible worst consequence, what something's going to happen. What if this happens? What if that happens? Another type of thinking is all or nothing, so believing that something or someone can only be good or only be bad, right or wrong, rather than seeing the kind of shades of grey in between. So jumping to extreme conclusions maybe, and not thinking about what's going on in the middle. Personalization, so taking on full responsibility for something, not considering that any other factors. So always blaming ourselves, feeling like something is our fault, where we're not really considering anything else, any other factors that might be involved. Discounting the positive. Again, this is something which is super common when we're feeling low. So we're very selective about focusing on the negative aspects of a situation and minimizing the positives. So even if we were given a compliment by someone or told that were doing a good job, our immediate thought might be, anyone could have done that. So we're immediately kind of dismissing the positives of that and minimizing them, and really just focusing on the negative. And we have shoulds and musts, again, really common thing. So when we're giving ourselves these really strict rules, I should do this, I shouldn't do that, I must be like this, I must be like that. And often these rules that we give ourselves are really unachievable, and it's really hard to kind of keep with those shoulds and musts. And then if we don't hit those shoulds and musts, that can lead to us feeling bad and guilty about ourselves maybe. We also have double standards, so setting very high or harsh standards for ourselves, but being more lenient, flexible with others. Mind reading, again, very common, and something which we probably indulge quite a lot in when we're feeling low. So we think that we know what other people are really thinking. We might assume that somebody is thinking a certain thing. She thinks this about me, she thinks that I'm lazy, or whatever it might be. So kind of assuming that we know what other people are thinking. And then finally, labeling. So using very negative, harsh, self-critical labels about ourselves, calling ourselves stupid, useless, a failure, or a fraud, tend to be very, very harsh, very direct, very to the point kind of comments about ourselves. Maybe just spend a minute thinking about if you recognize any of these thinking styles in your own ways of thinking. Is there any of those that kind of resonate for you? And we'll have a look at some examples now of some of these thinking styles. So, for example, we've got here, don't get out of bed on time that I had planned. That's probably something which a lot of us have been struggling with at the moment. So a thought that might go through our mind is, I'm useless, what's the point of doing anything? And that's a really common example of a type of thought. So just not considering the shades of grey in the middle, so just jumping to this conclusion that we're useless and that we can't do anything just because we haven't got out of bed on time. Another example, a friend doesn't respond to my text message. So a kind of an example of a thought that we might have about that here is, she's avoiding me, I must have done something wrong. And this is an example of a personalization type of thought. So immediately assuming that something is our fault and taking responsibility for that. So because a friend hasn't responded to our message, we're immediately assuming that it's something that we've done wrong. And another example is that, say we've made a spelling mistake in an email, a typical kind of thought that we might have when we're feeling low is that we're feeling, I'm feeling useless, I never get stuff right. And this is an example of labeling. So immediately giving ourselves this label of useless, and it's really harsh and it's very to the point. Again, it's quite a strong label to give ourselves, to call ourselves useless. I guess we hope that just in your day-to-day you might notice if these things are happening for you. If something happens and you're feeling a kind of a negative emotion about it, maybe just spend a minute to think about what's the kind of thoughts that are going around my mind about this. Am I mind reading? Am I labeling? Am I using maybe personalization? And just by giving ourselves these kind of labels for our thoughts can be quite a helpful thing to do. It might help to distance ourselves from our thoughts a little bit, just giving ourselves that reminder that Shanaz mentioned earlier, that our thoughts are not facts, that actually sometimes these unhelpful thinking habits aren't really doing us any favors, and they're not necessarily true as well. And we'll go on to talk a bit more about kind of how we can maybe have more of a balance of thinking. So we've got those same examples here along the edge. So didn't get out of bed on time, a friend doesn't respond to my text, made a spelling mistake in an email, and we've got that example of what our thought might be. But we've also put here some maybe more balanced ways to think about that. So if we start with our first example, so didn't get out of bed on time, I planned, I'm thinking I'm useless, what's the point of anything? Maybe it could be helpful to ask ourselves these questions that we've got around the side here. So which thinking style is this? So we were thinking that it's probably like an all or nothing. Is this true? I guess just because I didn't get out of bed at the time I planned doesn't mean that I'm completely useless, and it doesn't mean there's no point in doing anything. That's more of a feeling rather than a fact. How could I reframe this in a more balanced way? So our example here would be, I may not have got out of bed on time today, but maybe I was a bit ambitious about this time. I'll try again tomorrow. So maybe acknowledging that we didn't do what we wanted to do, but that's okay. We'll try again. Maybe we'll try and think about why that didn't quite work and how we could help ourselves to do it differently. So not immediately kind of berating ourselves about it, making ourselves feel bad about it, just acknowledging that didn't quite go to plan, but that's okay, we'll try again tomorrow. The next example here, we've got a friend doesn't respond to my text message, and as I mentioned, we were thinking that this is kind of a personalization type thought, so we immediately label ourselves, she's avoiding me, I must have done something wrong. But another way that we could think about this is that maybe my friend is busy or feeling overwhelmed herself. We are close friends, so I'll give her some more time. So it's not necessarily true that she's avoiding me. We don't know that. That's an assumption. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we've done anything wrong. Again, that's not necessarily true. We don't know that. So if we're thinking about it in a more balanced way, we need to just think about maybe how our friend might be feeling and not necessarily blaming ourselves about that. And then our final example, made a spelling mistake in an email. So again, we were thinking that would be more kind of a labeling type of thought. So I'm useless, I never get this stuff right. If we were to think about rebalancing that, our example would be, it was a mistake, I spell things correctly most of the time, I bet no one even noticed. So again, kind of thinking about, is this thought really true? Does this show that I'm completely useless and I never get stuff right? Not at all. I'm sure there's lots of things that we do get right. So just, again, trying to think about that in a more balanced way. So acknowledging that it was a mistake, but actually it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't mean that we're completely useless, and actually probably no one even noticed or cared anyway. So I'm hoping that what this can show is that our thoughts can really impact on how we're feeling. And if we're thinking very negatively and we're using these unhelpful thinking habits all of the time, that's going to really impact on our mood and how we're feeling. So we just encourage you to spend some more time acknowledging your thoughts and trying to challenge them and to maybe think about them in a different way.
So just to have a summary about negative thoughts, our negative automatic thoughts can take us away from the here and now, and noticing these unhelpful styles of thinking and refocusing attention can help us to manage this better. So why don't you take a moment to consider a more balanced interpretation? Ask yourself, is this reasonable? What would I tell a friend if they were thinking this way? And be aware of your triggers. What does it happen when you're watching the news? Is it kind of just when you're bored? You might want to use activity scheduling to ensure that you have activities planned at these times so that you don't spend time dwelling or ruminating on these things. Why not try mindfulness? Follow a YouTube tutorial or try an app such as Headspace and Calm, which has a lot of helpful exercises for mindfulness. And attend to your current physiological needs and respond. Is it that you're just hungry, thirsty, or tired? Our negative thoughts can make us feel quite irritable. It can impact how we feel. So actually kind of just paying attention to what our needs might be physically at that time. And it's quite helpful to monitor your negative thoughts as well, and kind of being aware of at what point do I feel this way, or is there specific situations where I tend to think this way, and just being aware of that can be really helpful. And then over time it might be that you realize, oh, I'm just using this thinking style of catastrophizing or mind reading, and that might help you to distance yourself from that negative thought. Or you might instantly be able to reframe it and think of it in a more balanced way. So kind of telling yourself, oh, I'm spiraling down this negative, spiraling down with my negative thoughts and focusing on it a lot. Maybe I just need to think of it in a more balanced way, and kind of repeating that to yourself to help you. And again, it's not easy to do straight away, but it does take a lot of practice and time. So making sure that you give yourself that time and being kinder to ourselves. What we want to think about now is problem solving during self-isolation. So we're kind of living in uncertain times at the moment with lockdown, kind of unsure what the future will hold sometimes. And it's quite normal to question how you're going to cope. And our problems can feel very overwhelming at the time. There might be things where you're thinking, how am I going to get food for myself and my family? It might be really busy outside, it might be crowded, it might be that there's nothing there. How am I going to do this? How will I manage to pay my bills? Is it that we're having financial trouble? You know, there might be things that we need to consider, but we're not sure what our options are yet. How will I manage without being able to see my friends and family? That can be really difficult given the restrictions that are placed on us, but maybe it's about thinking what our other options are. How can we be creative about this? And how will I keep my children entertained? It can be really exhausting with children being at home or having to homeschool them, and it can take up a lot of time. So maybe it's about thinking, how do we find some solutions to these problems? And what we're going to be looking at is problem solving this. So this is a step-by-step guide in terms of how you can think pragmatically to find solutions to the difficulties that you're facing. Now, the first step is to define what the actual problem is. Is it one of the problems that I've mentioned before in the previous slide? Is it about how will you maintain contact with friends or family? Is it about how will you be able to pay the bills and look after yourself financially? And what you want to do is then think of as many solutions as possible, no matter how ridiculous they seem. You don't want to discount anything that may come to mind. So taking the time and not rushing this to really think of what are the solutions to this problem that I have. The third step is then to consider the advantages and disadvantages of each solution. Again, taking the time to write this down for each of the solutions you've come up with, writing down what the pros and cons are of doing them or not doing them. The fourth step is to then choose a solution to implement. Now that you've written down the advantages and disadvantages and you've kind of reviewed what you've written, it's kind of then for you to choose which one sounds like the best possible option for me to go with. And then the fifth step is to plan how you're going to implement that chosen solution. So is this, particularly what is the solution? When are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? Will it be with the help of someone? So kind of just planning how this is going to happen. The sixth step is then to just carry it out. You might want to use your activity schedule to plan in that time of when you're going to do that particular task. And then the last step is then to review how this went. How did it go? Were there any problems that you faced? Or was it the right solution to choose? And you also want to think about, what did you learn from this? And problem solving is something that we might do sometimes naturally in our minds, but often when we're kind of struggling or we're feeling quite low or thinking negatively, our thoughts can get quite jumbled up and we're not thinking clearly and concisely. So what I'd encourage you to do is, if you are going to do something like problem solving, again, giving yourself that time with a pen and piece of paper to take the time to write it out, as in you'll be able to think about it more clearly and see it clearly in front of you. And now what Amy will do is go through an example of how you would do problem solving.
Okay, so for our example, we've defined our problem as, my good friend wants to catch up. I miss them, but I know it won't be the same as seeing each other in person, so I don't feel particularly up for it. I think this is something which probably lots of us have experienced at this time. So we're going to go through all of these possible different solutions then as the next step. And it's important to note that it doesn't matter how ridiculous it might seem. If it's something that is a solution, then put it down. So we could ignore the invitation, watch TV instead, suggest we catch up over video call instead, tell my friend we'll catch up another time, never speak to my friend again, meet up in person anyway, drink as much wine as I can before the call. So these are all of our different solutions to this problem. Our next step is to kind of consider the advantages and disadvantages to each of those solutions. So we're not going to go through each example, we're just going to go through a couple. There's probably some that you could eliminate straight away, probably some that you think, actually, now I think about it, I wouldn't even consider that as a solution. So you could maybe cross some of them out straight away. Just pick those ones that would be helpful to consider the advantages and disadvantages for. So solution one, ignore the invitation, watch TV instead. So the advantages to that is I can catch up on some TV and it feels easier. The disadvantages might be that my friend might feel upset that I've ignored them. I might make things feel strange when we next talk. I'm not sure when we'd next be able to meet up in person. I'd also miss out on that opportunity to catch up with them and to maybe hear their news, miss out on that opportunity to potentially feel good as well. Solution two, we had suggest we catch up over video call instead. So the advantages to that is that it means that we can stay in contact and I can hear how they're doing. It's relatively easy for me to do. My friend doesn't care what I look like, but it might be nice to get dressed up as though we're actually meeting anyway. It may be nice to see a familiar face. I might feel better for it. My friend would like to see me too, might make them feel better too. The disadvantages, I won't be able to watch TV. And then once we've gone through the advantages and disadvantages of all of those different solutions, we're going to think about which solution we want to implement. So hopefully by going through the advantages and disadvantages, that will help to kind of weigh things up for us, and there will be some clear solutions that feel like they have much more advantage and feel much more doable. So we're going to pick suggest we catch up over video call instead as our solution to implement. So our next step is to plan how we're going to actually implement this. So it's not as easy as just saying, yeah, okay, I'll do that. It's just thinking about, let's break this down into smaller tasks. How am I actually going to do it? So the first step is to reply to our friend, to suggest speaking over the video call instead, agree on a time, ensure that I'm available at this time. Maybe I'll have a shower and get ready to make it feel a bit more special. Maybe help me to feel a bit better about myself and a bit more positive about the call. And then our next step, once we've planned all of this, is to implement the plan. So carry out with our plan. And then a final step, which is also really important, is to review how it went. So how did it go? Were there any problems? Was it the right solution to choose? Did it go well? Did it not go so well? Was there anything that we can learn from it? So we've got here that it wasn't the same as in person, but that didn't matter because it was nice to catch up with my friend. I was glad we spoke. I should remember this. Sometimes when I want to curl up and avoid people, those are the times when it would be helpful to reach out. And there are lots of ways to stay in touch. So it's important to kind of review how that went, think about maybe going forward. So we've noted that it made me feel good and it's something that I could keep doing in the future. Also important to note when things maybe don't go so well. That's okay. You've already thought about all your different solutions, so just go back to your solutions and maybe pick another one. So just don't worry yourself about it. You've already thought about all the different things you could do. You've got other solutions. Maybe go back to another one and consider that one, instead of kind of falling into this cycle of worrying and feeling stressed about it again. Don't worry, just come back to your problem solving and try it again.
So now what we want to think about are some key points to remember from what we've learnt today. It's to stay mentally and physically active. So when activity scheduling, consider activities which challenge both your mind and your body. So whether that's making time for exercise, again, eating and sleeping, making sure that you have a balance of routine, necessary and pleasurable activities in your week. We also looked at kind of challenging your negative thoughts. So to remember that our thoughts are not facts, they are our opinions based on events. We want to stay connected. So trying to remember to remain in contact with friends and family, and supporting others can draw the focus away from our own difficulties. So it's important to make sure that we are still making time for one another. It's also good to think about having a balanced diet, so eating regularly throughout the day and trying to stick to the set meal times. Perhaps now is a good time to try out some new recipes, maybe trying something you've not had before or something that you really wanted to try and make. We also want to limit the time you spend watching the news. So limit yourself to once a day and not before bedtime, because that can often keep us awake or make our thoughts spiral a bit more. And only relying on kind of reliable sources such as the World Health Organization or the NHS website. So kind of just making sure that we're not reading into things too much, as often there might be news that are not reliable or true. So kind of making sure that you're not spending a lot of time looking for the news, and if you do, kind of limiting that to once a day. Why not keep a gratitude journal? At the same time each day, spend some time considering what you are thankful for. Often we might think this is just a very negative time, but there might be small positives that happen throughout our day that we might not always be aware of. So maybe giving yourself some time in the day just to think, what am I grateful for and thankful for today or for that week? And make positive changes and monitor the impact on your mood. Doing something will feel better than doing nothing, and even the small things will help. So hopefully from today, you've taken a lot of helpful strategies that you can start to practice and implement. Again, some things may be more relevant to you than others, but don't let that stop you from trying all of them. It's important to try them all and see what helps. Starting small is also good as well. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with too much. So just give yourself that time and be kind to yourself. Now, here are some further coping resources for COVID-19. So there are some mindfulness relaxation exercises here with these YouTube links. There's also links and good resources about managing our well-being during this difficult time. So if you kind of just want a bit of further reading about how to cope during this time and how to manage things better, these are good things to have a look at. There's also the Headspace app, which is offering a free section called Weathering the Storm. It includes meditation, advice around sleep and movement, and is a way of finding space and kindness for yourself and those around you. And again, another video about managing fear and anxiety around COVID-19. it's very uncertain times that we're in. So having some further helpful resources can be helpful for us to look at, and it might help manage our feelings better and our emotions. And again, there might be some local support that you need that you might not be aware of. So we've got here the links to Islington and Camden Council website, who are offering various forms of support. Please have a look where they're in the sections of social care. It might be with getting food or medicine. There might be online groups or activities. You may need some legal advice. So there's various kind of links provided in there that can help you if you're looking for some further practical support that you may not already be aware of. So encouraging you to have a look if you feel that there's a need or you're kind of struggling with anything. So to give you a summary of today and the workshop is we've looked at the maintenance of depression and the vicious cycle. So kind of remembering that we might stop doing things or avoid doing things because in the short term it gives us a sense of relief, and that might make you feel good in the short term, but in the longer term it can make us feel down. We lose that sense of enjoyment and pleasure from things, and then that kind of leads us to thinking quite negatively about ourselves, being quite critical. So kind of remembering how we can break that cycle by doing more and doing things that are meaningful and important to us. We've looked at changing unhelpful behaviours, so identifying what it is that we might be doing that is unhelpful and thought about areas in our life that we want to make more time for again. We also had a look at managing negative thoughts. So again, remembering that our thoughts are not facts and we want to think of them in a more balanced way. Maybe again, remembering, what would you say to a friend if they were having this thought? How can I think of this in a more balanced perspective? And we've also looked at problem solving during isolation. So if there's any practical problems that you face, using the step-by-step guide to think of as many solutions, writing the pros and cons, and kind of going with a solution that you feel is most suitable. What we also want to think about is what have you taken away from today? Is there anything in particular that stood out to you? A particular message, a strategy, or even just being aware of our feelings and emotions and our behaviours? Take a moment to think about what stood out to you, or maybe make a note of it. Thank you for listening to our workshop. We hope it's been helpful, and we hope you continue to take care and manage your well-being during this pandemic.
Yes, thank you, and take care of yourselves.